Why do you get to have a happy wedding when I'm a single mom? You should just be changing Liam's diapers. Those words were spat at me by my sister Ashley in the dining room of our grandparents' house after dinner, while the scent of the meal still lingered in the air. Her voice sounded like she was laughing, but the jealousy and frustration behind it were impossible to miss. With my wedding just 5 days away, I had decided to cherish this final night with my family at our grandparents' home. Ashley was there with her 1-year-old son, Liam, along with our mother, and for the first time in a while, everyone was together. Our grandparents, despite their age, still sat upright at the center of the table. Our mother seemed a little uneasy, but I could tell she was genuinely happy about having the whole family together again. When she smiled and said, "Your wedding is almost here," my heart softened for just a moment, but the clatter of Ashley slamming her glass on the table chilled the air. Pretending not to notice, I returned the smile and poured wine for our grandmother. Just for the night, before I were to leave the following day, I wanted to avoid any conflict. Still, I could feel Ashley's gaze stabbing into me from across the table. After dinner, when it was time to put Liam to bed, Ashley naturally pushed the task onto me. "Here, you do it. It's your usual role, right? You're Liam's babysitter, after all." Her words sounded less like a request and more like mockery, leaving me with a slightly bitter feeling. But I told myself this would be the last time, and that Liam was my adorable nephew. So I accepted him into my arms. The first time she asked, she had come to my place over the weekend saying, "It's really important work. Just for a bit, please. Mom has something to do too, and there's no one else I can ask." Back then, I thought it couldn't be helped if it was for work, so I agreed without much thought. But then she started asking once a month. Soon it became every other week, and before I knew it, Ashley was bringing Liam over every weekend. She began packing more clothes for him, and sometimes he even stayed overnight. I started to wonder deep down, is it really for work? But seeing Liam grow more attached to me little by little made me happy, and I didn't want to question it too much. There were times I was so exhausted from changing diapers, preparing bottles, or calming his cries that I just sat down on the floor. Still, hearing his gentle little breathing brought a strange kind of peace to my heart. Knowing that this peace would end made my chest tighten. Feeling a bit of sadness, I reached out and gently stroked Liam's soft hair as he slept. In my heart, I prayed that he would grow up healthy and live a life full of happiness. After finally getting Liam to sleep, I quietly walked down the hallway, heading back to my room. Just then, a door opened, and Ashley stepped out from inside. I stopped in my tracks without thinking. In her hand was a familiar red-covered passport. "Ashley, what are you doing with that?" I asked in a calm and composed voice. Ashley froze for a moment, then slowly turned to look at me with a smirk on her lips. That smile was cold and almost provocative. "I'm a single mom. Every day it's just me and Liam. I deal with his crying at night, work, and handle everything in life all by myself. You wouldn't understand, Madison. You can go out whenever you want, do whatever you like, and you don't have to take care of anyone. And now you get to have a wedding in Paris? I'm not letting you go." She tightened her grip on the passport, her knuckles turning white. Her eyes were filled with anger and frustration, yet she glared at me as if trying to hide her pain. "It's not fair. You should just stay as Liam's babysitter. Change his diapers, feed him milk, and raise him in my place." I stepped forward and looked Ashley straight in the eye. "What's unfair? You chose to be a single mother, and I chose my own path in life." My words were calm, but a strength rising from deep inside gave my voice weight. "Stop projecting your frustrations onto my life." Ashley fell silent, and the hand holding the passport trembled slightly. "Give me back my passport." When I said it with a firm tone, Ashley glared at me for a second, then abruptly turned on her heel. Still clutching the passport, she ran down the hallway and disappeared into her room. The door slammed shut, followed immediately by the sound of the lock clicking. I let out a deep sigh, walked up to her door, and tried the knob, but of course it didn't budge. "Ashley, give it back," I called out, but there was no response from inside. Seriously, why is Ashley always like this? Ever since we were little, she used to secretly take my things and do things just to upset me. She once wore my favorite sweater out and returned it all muddy. She also borrowed the allowance I had carefully saved up, saying, "Just a little loan," and never gave it back. "You're the big sister, aren't you?" With just that line, all her selfishness was always justified. I remember coming home happy one day after receiving an award at school, only for Ashley to sulk and lock herself in her room. Later, she cried to Mom, complaining it's not fair that Madison gets all the praise, and managed to get Mom to scold me instead. She always had to be the center of attention. She would ruin my moments of joy and significance in one way or another. Of course, I did try to speak up to our mother a few times, but every time I was told, Ashley is still just a child. Forgive her. And the issue was brushed aside with, I'll talk to her. Eventually, it became normal for me to be the one to give in. And now, with the passport, it's the same pattern all over again. To her, my wedding isn't something to celebrate. It's something to sabotage. But this time, I won't back down. I took a deep breath and firmly reminded myself of that. And strangely, I didn't feel panicked at all. I had anticipated this. That's why I left my real passport with my best friend, Chloe. Everything was already prepared. All that was left was to act. With that thought, a quiet sense of resolve lit up inside me. I took a deep breath and began packing my things. By midnight, the house had fallen silent. My grandparents, my mother, and Ashley were all fast asleep. I zipped my suitcase shut tightly. There was no need to sneak around anymore. This wasn't about running away. It was the proud first step toward the life I had chosen. I turned the doorknob with confidence and stepped into the quiet hallway. Standing tall, I walked toward the front door. I didn't care if my footsteps echoed. Each step felt like a sign carrying me from the past into the future. I had no intention of looking back anymore. As I stepped outside, the cold night air brushed against my cheeks, and I took a deep breath. It felt like the weight pressing on my chest was slowly lifting, and my posture naturally straightened. As I walked toward the meeting point, a small car's headlights glowed softly in the distance of the dark yard, and the horn sounded once. It felt like a signal from the new life waiting to welcome me. It was Chloe. Madison. Chloe got out of the car, ran toward me, and smiled in relief when she saw me. I'm so glad you're okay. Of course. No one can stop me now, I said with a smile and loaded my suitcase into the car. Chloe grabbed my arm and nodded firmly. You did great. From here on, I'm with you. Let's head to the airport. I explained what had happened with my sister earlier that day. So Ashley really went through with it, huh? Chloe said, squinting through the windshield. Yeah, I was right to take precautions. I exhaled in relief. She probably thinks she won by stealing the passport, not knowing it was expired. Chloe chuckled bitterly. She's always been like that. Whenever you tried to do something important, she'd find a way to mess it up. I nodded quietly. After Dad passed away and we all moved in with our grandparents, Ashley became more and more dependent on Mom and them. Whenever something happened, she'd cry for help, and everyone just accepted it like it was normal. Being in that house felt suffocating to me, like I didn't belong. That's why I started living on my own when I entered college. It was the only way I felt like I could finally breathe. Yeah, I remember. Chloe smiled and turned on the blinker. You wanted to build a world of your own, right? Exactly. But Ashley was different. She fully enjoyed being the Carter daughter in that house. She thought someone else would always take responsibility. Is that how it was with Liam's father, too? Chloe's voice softened a little. I let out a small sigh. I think so. When she found out she was pregnant, the man who was Liam's father apparently ran away and refused to take responsibility. Back then, Mom and our grandparents told her, have the baby. We can't let the Bennett family bloodline end. And so the whole family supported Ashley in the end, but most of the childcare ended up falling on me. Chloe glanced at me and tightened her grip on the steering wheel. I always saw you taking care of him on the weekends. Honestly, it made me mad. I felt like you were sacrificing your own life. Thank you, Chloe. Liam never did anything wrong. His smile always heals my soul. That's why I don't think of it as a sacrifice. Chloe was silent for a while. Then she let out a small laugh. Seriously, Madison, you're just too kind for your own good. I looked out the window, narrowing my eyes at the city lights passing by. From now on, I'm going to live my own life. The air in the car filled with quiet resolve as the engine cut through the night. Eventually, the airport lights came into view in the distance. When the car stopped in front of the terminal, I let out a deep breath. We're here. Chloe turned off the engine and looked back at me. Take care, Madison. Text me as soon as you land in Paris. Of course. Thank you, Chloe, truly. I unbuckled my seatbelt and took her hand. I'm looking forward to your reception in the States. Chloe laughed. I'm definitely inviting you. I can't imagine a reception without you there. I smiled back. If you ever need anything, just call me. Don't worry about the time difference. Her words filled my chest with warmth. Yeah, having you in my life has really saved me. I picked up my suitcase and took a deep breath. Have a great trip, Madison. Enjoy your new life. Chloe's voice gave me the final push I needed. When I turned around, she was waving at me with both hands through the glass. I felt a gentle warmth rise in my chest as I waved back with a small motion. I wouldn't hesitate anymore. From here on, this was the path I chose. As I began walking toward the terminal, the footsteps and announcements around me echoed faintly, and a sense of reality slowly returned. After checking in and taking my seat on the plane, the murmurs and low hum of the engine filled my ears. I exhaled slowly and deeply, leaning back into the seat. In that moment, I felt the tension in my heart begin to loosen. At last, my life was truly beginning. Looking at my reflection in the window, I naturally began to think of my fiancé, Jackson. The first time I met him was during a business trip to Paris. I had nearly gotten lost in the unfamiliar city when he smiled and gave me directions. I still vividly remember the calmness in his voice and the sincerity in his eyes. He told me he was from America and was living in Paris for work. After that, as we began working together more, my heart gradually began to open up. You're too hard on yourself. Jackson said that to me once, smiling gently as if telling me to relax. His words sank quietly into my chest, warming the tightness inside. Soon after, we began keeping in touch, and naturally, we started dating. Jackson started coming back to the US more often, and I also found time to visit Paris. We began spending more time together in between our work schedules. Even though we were living separately in the US and Paris, each reunion made our bond feel stronger. The time I spent with him became something truly precious to me. One day, while walking through a small alley in Paris, we stumbled upon a church. It was an old stone building, rarely visited by tourists. I'd be so happy if we could get married here. The words slipped out naturally, and Jackson looked at me in surprise before smiling warmly. Eventually, we decided, let's get married here. Of course, we considered inviting our families and friends to Paris, but thinking about our grandparents' age, the long trip would have been too much. Most of Jackson's family and friends were also in the US. Bringing everyone to Paris would have been too difficult and expensive to prepare for. So we decided to have a quiet ceremony in Paris with just the two of us, and later hold a reception in the US once things had settled down. Paris would be a place just for us, and the reception would be a chance to thank our family and friends. Thinking that way, the answer came to us naturally. About 10 hours later, as morning light streamed through the window, the plane approached the skies over Paris. I later heard that the house I had left behind was quiet that morning, as if nothing had happened. Everyone must have assumed I had already left for Paris. Everyone except my sister. I had sent a follow-up email to everyone except my sister, letting them know I had already left. Ashley probably never imagined that I had managed to get married without a passport. She's always been naive, so maybe she thought I was just angry and staying at Chloe's house or something. After safely getting married in Paris, I had quietly begun my new life there with Jackson. Mornings spent eating croissants at a cafe, afternoons strolling along the Seine. Sharing household chores and work, our peaceful days felt like an entirely different world from the chaotic life I used to know. The tension from the night I left home and Ashley's jealousy felt like distant memories. But somewhere in my heart, there was still a small knot left unresolved. And then, 2 weeks after the wedding, Jackson and I set foot on American soil once again. The purpose was to hold a reception for family and friends. I had already made up my mind. This was the time to tell my family the truth about that night. The night before the reception, both our families and relatives had gathered at a hotel dining room near the venue. The mood was cheerful and relaxed as we prepared for the next day's celebration. At least, it appeared that way from the outside. After the rehearsal dinner, I gathered just my family into a separate room. I couldn't move forward into tomorrow without saying anything. It was the moment to finally reveal the truth I had kept locked away for so long. I have something to tell you all. As I spoke, Ashley's shoulder twitched slightly. Grandma looked at me curiously. What is it? Some happy news? I continued in a calm voice. The day before I left for my wedding in Paris, Ashley stole my passport. Luckily, I had given the real one to my best friend Chloe beforehand, so I was able to depart without a problem. but the theft did happen. The room fell silent. Ashley's face twisted uncomfortably. Wait a minute, I didn't do that. Ashley stood up, her voice trembling slightly. I looked straight at her. Ashley, stop lying. When we ran into each other in front of my room, you were holding my passport. When I asked you to give it back, you said, I'm a single mom. And yet you get to have a wedding in Paris? That's not fair. You should just stay as Liam's babysitter. Change his diapers, give him milk, and raise him in my place. I'm not letting you go. And then you ran into your room and locked the door. Ashley looked frustrated and averted her gaze. Do you even know how I've felt all this time? I don't care. And there's no proof about the passport anyway. That's just your delusion. Did you really think I never made it to Paris? The wedding went exactly as planned. I left the US without any problems that day. Ashley bit her lip and said nothing. Hearing those words, both our grandparents' and mother's expressions darkened. I slowly took out my phone. If you have nothing to say, that's fine. Then explain this. I placed the phone on the table and played the security camera footage from that night. In the quiet room, a video showed Ashley walking down the hallway. On screen, she entered my room, and a few minutes later came out holding my passport. What? Ashley stood up from her chair, her face flushed red. Stop! Delete that! Ashley, this is the truth. Even now, are you still going to deny it? Grandfather spoke in a heavy voice after seeing the footage. That's enough. This is all the proof we need. Ashley bit her lip and collapsed back into her chair. I didn't stop speaking. And that's not all. We need to talk about Liam, too. Every weekend, you left him with me. You always said it was because of work, but was that really true? Ashley opened her mouth slightly, but couldn't say a word. Our mother slowly turned her gaze toward her daughter. Ashley, is that true? Ashley trembled slightly and finally murmured, there were days when it wasn't work. I see. So I've been deceived this whole time. Those days, all my time was spent for Liam. I took on everything. I took a deep breath. But I'm not your convenient babysitter anymore. Liam is adorable, but I have my own life to live. After a moment of silence, Grandfather slowly stood and spoke in a low voice. Ashley, we had set aside money to help you buy a home. $400,000, but that offer is now revoked. Ashley looked up, eyes filled with despair as she stared at him. What? Why? You know exactly why. His voice was cold. You deceived your family and tried to steal Madison's future. You'll have to pay the price for that yourself. Ashley collapsed in her chair and burst into tears. Madison, please don't abandon me. I stood and spoke quietly. Ashley, I'm not abandoning you. It's just time for you to take responsibility for your own life. Leaving those words behind, I took a deep breath and walked out of the room. When I returned to the dining area, Jackson greeted me with a gentle smile. As I sat beside him, I felt a strange sense of release, and my posture naturally straightened. Jackson gently took my hand and smiled. You finally said it. I smiled softly and let out a deep breath. The following day was the reception. No one would stop my future anymore. On the day of the reception, the venue was adorned with flowers and soft music played in the background. Relatives and friends filled the seats and cheerful laughter echoed through the room, but Ashley was nowhere to be seen among them. I let out a quiet breath deep in my chest. Since the previous night, she had locked herself in her room and never came out. When I heard in the morning that no one had seen her, I felt more relieved than sad, as if the storm had finally passed. I was able to truly enjoy the reception. The weight that had been on my heart for so long was lifted after finally putting everything into words the previous night, and I could spend the day feeling genuinely happy. As the reception wound down and people began chatting and mingling, my mother quietly approached my table. Even amid the noise of the venue, her expression looked somewhat stiff. Madison. When I looked up, she began to apologize. I'm truly sorry for everything. I gasped without thinking. It was the first time my mother had ever apologized to me like this. I never really listened to you all these years. I always believed Ashley's side of the story. Even when she said she had work on the weekends, and when you said it was okay to help with Liam, I believed her when she said she had already hired a babysitter. I never imagined that you were the one taking care of him every weekend. She slowly took my hand. You've been carrying the burden for Ashley all this time. After your father passed away, I placed all that weight on you. I thought protecting her meant protecting the family, but in doing so, I ended up tying down your future too. Her voice trembled. Madison, you are truly a strong woman. I'm so proud of you. Knowing that you're happy now means more to me than anything. I quietly squeezed her hand in return. Thank you, Mom. I won't be held back by the past anymore. From now on, I'll choose my own life. For myself. She smiled softly and wiped the corners of her eyes. Lean on Jackson, okay? If your father were here, I'm sure he'd say the same thing. Her words filled my chest with quiet warmth. I smiled back at my mother and looked toward Jackson. He was looking at me too, and gave a silent nod. Bathed in the warm light of the venue, I felt it clearly. From this point forward, a future no one could shake awaited me. Even my grandparents, though showing signs of fatigue, eventually smiled and gave us their heartfelt blessing. Seeing that, I quietly thought to myself, I'm so glad I made it this far. After the reception, I spent time in the US at a slower pace. I went shopping with my mother, had meals with Jackson's parents, and reconnected with old friends. Each moment became irreplaceable. It felt like I was slowly stitching together the past and present, one piece at a time. 2 weeks later, Jackson and I returned to Paris. As I watched the American landscape slowly disappear outside the airplane window, I made a quiet vow in my heart. From now on, I will cherish the time we have together. Life in Paris quickly returned to normal, and I began exchanging messages and phone calls with my mother from time to time. One day, she confided in me. After that night, your grandparents were deeply disappointed. They decided to completely cut off support for Ashley. Grandmother had apparently cried bitterly, saying, it was meant to protect the family's honor. Grandfather had told her sternly, from now on, she must take responsibility for herself. And since then, had stopped all financial assistance. This time, even my mother didn't protect her. I used to think it was my duty as a mother to defend her, but not this time. I've decided she needs to take full responsibility for her own actions. Her voice over the phone sounded slightly sad, but also somewhat relieved. After a pause, I quietly replied, thank you. I learned about Ashley's current situation from a phone call with Chloe after I had returned to Paris. Chloe's voice was a bit heavy as she said, Ashley's really struggling right now. Ashley had lost all financial support from the family and started living alone with Liam in a cheap apartment. She couldn't find steady work for a while and is now juggling multiple part-time jobs just to get by. Naturally, she couldn't afford a babysitter, and overwhelmed by unfamiliar childcare, she stayed up late balancing the budget, trying to manage rent and utilities each month. At night, she gets constantly woken up by Liam's crying, and just when she'd finally closed her eyes, morning would come. The babysitting she once casually pushed onto me has now come full circle, and Ashley was forced to face it herself. With no one to rely on and exhaustion that seemed endless, maybe she has come to understand how much time and freedom I had sacrificed. Sometimes thinking about Ashley still brings a pain to my chest. But from the moment I found the courage to walk out that night, I finally began to reclaim myself. Knowing that I no longer have to live as someone else's sacrifice brings an unexpected sense of lightness to my heart. I don't know what the future holds, but I won't run away anymore and I won't be shaken by anyone. From now on, I will build my life. With Jackson by my side. This is where my real life begins. I whispered quietly in my heart and smiled.